Legend: the maiden who became a white lotus. Once upon a time, during the reign of the 18th Hung king, there was a peaceful village by the Zhuang River where a young girl named Hoa Trin lived. She was the youngest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Li, villagers known for growing lotus flowers. The village wasn't called by a formal name. People simply referred to it as White Lotus Village because the land was fertile, the water fresh all year round, and the lotuses grew thick and tall, each bloom as white as wild grass in the monsoon wind. Hoa Trin was beautiful in both appearance and character. Her skin was as fair as a lotus petal. Her long hair reached her waist, and her eyes were as clear as the village well. But what truly earned her the love of the villagers was her deep, filial piety and rare kindness. Every morning at the crow of the rooster, she would rise early to pick lotuses from the pond, help her parents pack tea, and then set aside wilted petals and withered leaves to give to the elderly in the village. The children loved listening to her stories, and the adults admired her gentle voice and respectful manners. Some said she was a fairy sent to earth, for lotuses around her always bloomed earlier, smelled sweeter and shone whiter than anywhere else. One old man even claimed to have seen a sacred turtle rise from the pond as she was washing clothes, its eyes sparkling like jewels, whispering something before disappearing. Word of her reached the king. Curious, he sent an envoy to invite Hoa Trin to the palace to be chosen as a royal concubine. But she refused firmly, saying, "I'm a humble girl who knows only how to pick lotuses and make tea. Golden halls and jeweled palaces are not where I belong." The king, though angered, saw her resolve and virtue, and did not force her. Instead, he honored her parents and issued an edict forbidding anyone to pressure her into marriage. However, a high-ranking official named Tao Thuong, known for his wealth and cruelty, became obsessed with her beauty. At over 40, he had already taken 3 wives but was never satisfied. Upon hearing of Hoa Trin, he sent matchmakers with lavish gifts, and when she refused, he resorted to threats. One night, he even ordered men dressed as bandits to set fire to a part of the lotus pond to coerce her. Still, Hoa Trin remained steadfast. Kneeling before her ancestral altar, she vowed, "I will keep my heart pure like the lotus on water. Better to die than become the concubine of a wicked man." Enraged, Tao Thuong ordered her kidnapping. His men seized her one moonless night and placed her on a boat traveling down the Zhuang River. But when the boat reached the sacred part of the lotus pond, a strange wind arose. Clouds darkened the sky and whirlpools formed around the boat. Hoa Trin did not cry. Instead, she removed her white robe, laid it gently on the water, and leapt in. Lightning split the sky. The boat broke in two. Soldiers scattered and swam ashore in terror. But Hoa Trin vanished beneath the pond. The next morning, villagers found her robe draped on a giant lotus bud, still fragrant like her hair in the wind. In the middle of the pond, right where she had disappeared, bloomed an enormous white lotus never seen before, its petals 3 layers thick, and whenever the wind passed, one could faintly hear the whisper of poetry, as if she were still telling stories to the children. From then on, that bloom was called the Maiden's White Lotus, and Hoa Trin was worshipped as the White Lotus Lady. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, the villagers hold a lotus festival to offer incense and remember her grace. After Hoa Trin transformed into the white lotus in the pond, another miracle occurred. The entire lotus marsh began to emit a strange fragrance, sweet yet pure, cool yet deep. Anyone who passed by would stop in wonder, overwhelmed by its scent. The place where she vanished became sacred. No one dared to pick lotuses there nor cast a fishing line. The village elders whispered, "That place is sacred. A celestial maiden returned to the heavens there." Gradually, the villagers built a small shrine in the middle of the lotus pond. They called it Shrine of the Maiden, made of bamboo and lotus leaves, with lanterns lit all night. On the 1st and 15th days of the lunar month, people brought offerings of fruit and flowers. Strangely, every sincere prayer seemed to be answered. A poor girl once prayed for her mother's illness to heal, and the next day, a wandering herbalist from afar happened to visit, bringing rare medicine. A blind man lost in the woods spent a night at the shrine and woke up, seeing faint light for the first time in years. Word spread far and wide. People began referring to the White Lotus Lady, a celestial spirit guarding the land and protecting the innocent. The king heard the tales and sent officials to verify. What they saw was wondrous. Touched by the miracles, the king issued a decree proclaiming her as Princess of Sacred Protection, elevating the shrine to a national temple, rebuilt with precious wood. A three-tiered White Lotus statue was carved, with her serene face gazing out over the sacred pond. As for Tao Thuong, ever since the boat capsized, he was haunted by nightmares. Every night he dreamed of lotus petals covering his bed, wrapping around his neck like ghostly hands. He burned with fever, muttering, "Forgive me. I'll stop, please." But his condition worsened. On the night of a full moon, servants heard rushing water from the pond behind his estate. Rushing out, they found only blooming white lotuses. Tao Thuong had vanished without a trace. From then on, people believed the white lotus is not just a pure flower. It is the embodiment of virtue, loyalty, and the inner strength of Vietnamese women. Several decades passed as the country fell into chaos. With endless wars between regional lords, the people suffered greatly. Yet strangely, the village of White Lotus remained peaceful and untouched. Soldiers marching through the area often told tales of a mysterious calm. As soon as they crossed into the village, tempers eased, men grew quiet, horses stopped neighing, and even the campfires burned as gently as the clay stoves in farmers' homes. An old general once passed through and remarked, "This land carries sacred energy. Surely a divine spirit guards it." Indeed, the shrine of the maiden was always lit with incense year-round. In times of turmoil, villagers would gather to pray, and soon gentle rain would fall. Crops revived and famine would pass. When someone fell ill, they would drink water from the sacred lotus pond where she had vanished, and soon recover. Villagers often said, "The White Lotus lady is still with us. Only mortal eyes can't see her." One year, however, brought great hardship. Harsh winds blew in March. The lotus flowers withered en masse. The water turned muddy, and dead fish floated across the surface. Fear spread. One night, the village elder dreamt of Hoa Trin, her hair flowing, her white robe fluttering in the mist. She whispered, "People have forgotten righteousness, forgotten loyalty and kindness. That's why the land cracks and the lotuses die. Teach the children again, to be true, to be filial, to love others." He woke with purpose. The next day, he gathered the villagers and reopened the old school to teach ancient scripts and morals. They restored traditional rituals and began storytelling festivals for children. Strangely enough, exactly 3 months later, the lotuses bloomed in full again. The pond turned clear and the fragrance returned. The people believed Hoa Trin never left them. She had become the spirit of the land, the water, the lotus itself, to remind people to hold onto compassion and purity amid the ever-changing world. Time flowed on, from one dynasty to another, from the Hung kings to the Li, Tran and Lei dynasties, and now into the modern age. The village of White Lotus still lay quietly beside the gentle Zhuang River, but as progress came, many things began to change. A new asphalt road was built through the lotus wetlands. Heavy machines arrived. Developers filled ponds with dirt to make way for factories and resorts. Children no longer learned classical scripts or heard folk tales. Instead, they played on smartphones and watched foreign shows. The adults were busy trading and forgot the sacred days of the lunar calendar. The shrine of the maiden grew silent and empty. Then one day, a team of workers entered the very center of the lotus pond, the sacred spot where the magical white lotus once bloomed, to dig the foundation for a parking lot. As the diggers struck into the earth, the midday sun suddenly vanished behind dark clouds. Fierce winds howled, mud bubbled up, and the pond's water began to whirl. One worker shouted, "Something smells strange. It's the scent of lotus petals." The foreman snapped, "Nonsense. Keep digging." But just then the ground gave way. The excavator tilted violently, and a loud boom thundered like a storm in the mountains. Terrified, the workers fled. That night, villagers claimed they saw a woman in white standing by the pond, holding a lotus branch, her eyes sorrowful, gazing toward the old shrine. The next morning, the pond overflowed. White lotuses bloomed wildly, even though it was the dry season. The elders knelt down, tears streaming. "She has returned. The White Lotus lady is angry." The new village head, a young woman named Mai Lai, had just moved back from Hanoi, where she'd taught at a university, to care for her ailing mother. Witnessing the strange events, she felt a chill, but also something stirred deep within her heart. That evening, she walked to the shrine of the maiden. She swept away the cobwebs, cleaned the statue, and lit the first incense stick the shrine had seen in nearly 20 years. She whispered, "If you're still here, show me what I must do to save our village, to protect the White Lotus." Ever since lighting incense at the shrine of the maiden, Li began having strange dreams. Every night she saw an endless lotus pond. At its center stood a young woman in a flowing white dress, her face serene, long hair cascading down her back, hands clasped gently, smiling. At first, Li thought they were just dreams, but the fragrance of lotus in her sleep was exactly the same as the scent in the shrine, gentle and deep, touching something deep within her soul. A few days later, while cleaning behind the altar, Li discovered a rotting wooden plank. Beneath it was a small compartment holding an old book wrapped in brocade. On the cover were 3 classical Chinese characters, embroidered in gold, Lian Tam Ki, the heart of the lotus. She opened it and found ancient handwriting, soft and flowing, telling stories from over 1,000 years ago. It was the personal journal of none other than Hoa Trinh. Inside, Hoa Trinh had recorded her final thoughts before leaping into the pond, her wishes for future generations, and most strikingly, a prophecy. There will come a girl who bears the heart of the lotus, returning to this place in a time when people forget their roots, and the land is torn apart. If she can keep her heart pure, she will awaken the village spirit, and the White Lotus shall bloom once more for generations. Reading those words, Li wept. She looked around the quiet shrine, her heart swelling. Could it be her? Could everything she had experienced be part of a fate woven long ago? The next morning, Li gathered the villagers. She shared everything, her dreams, the ancient journal, and the prophecy. At first, some doubted, but then Old Man Tu, the shrine's longtime caretaker, stood up and said, "I once heard my great-grandmother tell this tale. Now that young Li has found the book, this is fate. Our village lives because of the lotus, and the lotus lives because of the people's hearts." From that day forward, the village began to change. After that village meeting, Li began planning the revival of White Lotus Village. She went door to door, encouraging villagers to join hands in restoring the lotus ponds. At first, many hesitated. They were used to renting their land to factories, trading goods, and few had interest in growing lotus or practicing old customs. But Li did not give up. She and a few elderly villagers began replanting lotus in abandoned plots. She asked idle youth to clean trash around the pond, and every weekend she hosted storytelling sessions for children. She even created a social media group called Fragrance of the White Lotus, where she posted old and new images, moral lessons, and excerpts from the Heart of the Lotus journal she had discovered. Slowly, small changes began to ripple through the village. The first lotus buds bloomed, even though it wasn't yet blooming season. Children put down their phones, asked their parents to let them help plant lotus, and listened to ancient tales. Travelers from afar began visiting the village, intrigued by the legend of the girl with a lotus heart. By July, during the season of Vu Lan, the Vietnamese Day of Filial Piety, My Lai organized the first lotus festival in more than 30 years. The shrine of the maiden was lit with lanterns, elders wore traditional long robes, and children recited poems about gratitude and love for parents. That night, something miraculous occurred. In the middle of the pond, a massive white lotus bloomed, glowing softly as if moonlight were shining from within its petals. The entire village fell silent. My Lai knelt down, hands pressed together. "You heard me." After the Lotus Festival, the name White Lotus Village spread across the country. Film crews and tourism investors flocked in. They proposed building an eco-tourism zone, filming a drama series, and launching bus tours to the Lotus Pond. At first, the villagers rejoiced, thinking they could both preserve tradition and improve their livelihoods. But soon things spiraled out of control. A large corporation from the city presented a comprehensive redevelopment plan, building concrete bridges, cutting roads through the pond, and constructing lakeside resorts. They signed deals with former local officials without consulting the villagers. My Lai strongly opposed the plan. She called an emergency meeting and pleaded with the villagers to preserve the untouched beauty of the pond. If we pour concrete into the pond, the lotus will die. And if the lotus dies, so will our village's spirit. Some villagers agreed, but many wavered. Sweet promises, compensation money, and dreams of wealth made hearts falter. One night, someone anonymously sent Mai Lai a threatening letter, warning her to step aside or face consequences. She was afraid, but she did not back down. That night, she went to the shrine of the maiden, lit incense, and sat silently before the statue of Hoa Trin. Suddenly, a drop of water fell from the stone lotus beside the statue, though there had been no rain. At that moment, a gentle voice echoed in her mind. One who holds the heart of the lotus does not fear the storm. Stand firm. This pond is the blood of generations. It cannot be traded for silver and gold. The next morning, Mai Li submitted a petition to the provincial authorities, backed by hundreds of villagers' signatures. She also attached a copy of the Heart of the Lotus journal as both spiritual and historical evidence. The battle to protect the lotus pond had begun. Mai Lai's petition shook public opinion. News outlets picked up the story, and people from across the country voiced support. Social media buzzed with the tale of the girl with a lotus heart, no longer just a legend, but a real person defending her village's soul. The provincial government launched an official investigation, but the investment company didn't sit quietly. They hired people to spread false rumors about Mai Lai, accusing her of blocking progress and hurting local development. They even threatened villagers, pressuring some to sign documents agreeing to fill in the pond. Division began to form within the village. Some advised Mai Lai to step down for everyone's peace. Others said, "Lotuses can't feed our children." On the internet, strangers mocked her, claiming the lotus heart was a silly myth. Mai Lai felt her spirit falter. That night, the wind picked up. She sat alone before the shrine, her tears falling onto the cold stone floor. She whispered, "Maybe I'm not as strong as you. I'm afraid our people are losing faith." Suddenly, from the surface of the pond, lotus petals gently rose into the air, twirling in circles under the moonlight. A thin mist drifted from the shrine and formed the outline of Hoa Trin, her long hair flowing, white robe dancing in the wind. Her soft voice echoed, "Faith doesn't need a crowd. Just one soul shining bright is enough to keep the lotus alive. Remember, even a single bloom can perfume the entire swamp." The next morning, Mai Li walked to the pond. In the center, there remained only one white lotus, twice the usual size, blooming radiantly as if untouched by mud. And in that moment, she understood. As long as even one lotus remains, hope lives on. On the day of the public hearing between the authorities, villagers, and the investment company, heavy rain fell from early morning. Yet the people of White Lotus Village arrived in full force. Many wore white shirts and pinned lotus flowers to their chests, as if to say, "We stand with the lotus." The company presented flashy blueprints, promising a world-class eco-resort, new jobs, and rising incomes. Some local officials urged villagers to sign land leasing agreements. Tension filled the air. When it was Mai Lai's turn to speak, she stepped to the podium calm-eyed, holding a copy of the Heart of the Lotus. She didn't read from her prepared notes, but looked directly at the crowd. "I'm not against progress, but if progress means erasing our roots, is that future truly worth it? The lotus isn't just a flower. It's our memory, our values, the spirit of this place. If we let it disappear, it's no different than cutting down the very tree our ancestors planted." She paused, then raised the manuscript. More than 1,000 years ago, a girl vowed to become one with this land to protect its purity. Today I only continue her promise, nothing more, nothing less. A heavy silence followed. Then an old woman stood up, her hand trembling. "My family has grown lotus for 3 generations. I can't read books, but I know this. Without lotus, this village is no longer our village." Applause followed. Then a farmer, a retired teacher, and a group of young people. The entire hall awakened. At that moment, a thunderclap roared and the power cut out. Darkness fell over the hall. But then, through the open windows, a soft white light drifted in. Everyone turned to look. Out in the center of the pond, the single white lotus was still glowing brightly in the rain. No one said another word. They understood the lotus had spoken. After that fateful day, the province officially canceled the plan to fill the lotus pond. The area was designated as a community cultural heritage site, protected by the Department of Culture. News spread nationwide. Schools organized field trips to the village, where students heard tales of Hoa Trinh and the lotus-hearted girl, Mai Li. People from all over the country wrote letters to the village. One came from an old carpenter in Ha Jiang who handwrote, "Thank you. Because of you, I believe my hometown can keep its soul too." A student of architecture sent a design for a wooden bridge circling the pond, not touching the lotus lit by firefly-like solar lights, offered freely. Mai Lai was moved, but she didn't stop there. She founded the Lotus Heart Center in a thatched house by the pond, dedicated to collecting folk tales, teaching morals to children, and organizing traditional festivals. One day while cleaning out the old library, she found a yellowed scrap of paper tucked behind a picture frame in the shrine. The words were handwritten in delicate strokes. "The second lotus will bloom when earth meets water. Water meets soul and soul meets itself again." She stared at it for a long time. No one knew who wrote it or when. But deep inside, she felt something was still unfinished. The strange words on the scrap of paper haunted Mai Lai's mind. She brought it to Old Man Tu, the shrine's keeper for nearly 40 years, but he only shook his head. That line, "It's not in the heart of the lotus," and no ancestor ever mentioned it. Restless, Mai Lai began to dream again, this time not of her village's lotus pond, but of a strange forest. The trees were dark and twisted, and water flowed quietly beneath their roots. At the forest's heart stood a small house made of aged bamboo, roofed with palm leaves. Hanging from the eaves was a string of 4 dried lotus petals, ancient but still intact. In the dream, a voice whispered, "The beginning is not the end. To understand the past, you must return to its soil." Mai Li awoke, heart pounding. She pored over the heart of the lotus, searching every footnote, every verse. At last, in a tiny annotation, she found, "Before returning to the pond, Trinh once lived in Thach Ha, a stony forest land on the Lam River's southern bank." The next morning, she boarded a bus alone to Ha Tin. The people of Thach Ha barely remembered any tales of Hoa Trinh, but in an ancient pagoda, an old monk handed her something passed down through generations. This was left by a girl in white, more than 1,000 years ago. It was a lotus petal carved in stone, stored in a lacquered wooden box. On the back was etched, "The first petal is faith, the second is heart, the third is courage, the fourth is awakening. Only those who bear all 4 shall see the light within the mud." Mai Li held the box to her chest, tears spilling from her eyes. She now knew the journey had just begun. The lotus pond was only the starting point. She must go on, to find all 4 lotus petals. Returning from Thach Ha, Mai Lai wrapped the carved stone lotus petal in an embroidered cloth her grandmother once left behind. For many nights, she stayed up reading old historical texts, not from modern libraries, but hand-copied manuscripts passed down through generations. She remembered the inscription, "The third petal is courage, the strength to walk through darkness." One old footnote in the heart of the lotus mentioned a place called the Infong Mountain, the tallest peak in Ungay region, where a girl in white once led villagers against northern invaders and vanished into fire. Mai Lai made her way to Thien Phong. It was a wild, misty land rarely visited. The trail up the mountain was covered in moss, the grass tall as her waist. Locals vaguely remembered a white-robed girl, and all pointed to a sharp peak called Head of Fire, marked by a burn that never faded. After 2 days of climbing through cold fog, Mai Lai reached the summit. There was nothing but stone and wind, yet when she placed the stone lotus on the ground, a sunbeam pierced the clouds, landing precisely where she stood. The earth beneath her feet cracked softly. Brushing away moss and grass, she uncovered a thin wooden plaque etched with words. "Courage is not fearlessness. It is walking forward even when you know you may lose everything. If you have courage, burn incense where fire once raged, and the third petal shall appear." With trembling hands, she lit her last matchstick and offered a stick of incense. The mountain wind howled, yet the flame endured. Smoke rose and coiled into the shape of a red lotus in bloom. And in the ashes, she found a shard of red ceramic shaped like a lotus petal, dusted in black soot as if it had just come through fire. She placed the third petal beside the first 2. Her heart clenched. The last petal, awakening, would be the hardest to find. 3 petals, faith, heart, courage, now rested in My Lai's hands. But there were no more maps, no hints, no guiding dreams. Only a deep silence within her. She returned to White Lotus Village in early autumn. The pond was peaceful. Children laughed by the water. Adults tended young lotus shoots. Everything seemed the same. But something felt different. People looked at her with admiration, some even awe. They called her the lotus-hearted teacher, spirit of the pond. Though loving, she was no longer simply My Lai. She realized she had drifted from her original route, just a girl, who loved her homeland and wanted to keep the mud for the lotus to bloom. One night she walked out to the wooden bridge in the middle of the pond, holding the 3 petals. The full moon reflected on the water. She whispered, "Where is the last petal?" Suddenly the water stirred beneath her. A gentle wind passed, carrying a scent of incense. On the lake's surface, her reflection appeared, but it wasn't her as she was now. The girl in the water still looked like My Lai, but wore white like Hoa Trinh. Hair loose, hands empty, eyes soft yet radiant. A voice spoke, not from afar this time, but from within her chest. Awakening is not something you seek. It comes when you stop seeking and see yourself. At that moment, the 3 petals in her hands warmed and glowed. They vibrated softly and joined together. In the center, a 4th petal appeared, ivory white, as delicate as morning mist. Untouched by fire, earth, or water. She reached out and touched it, eyes filled with tears. The 4th petal, awakening, does not come from the outside. It only appears when the search ends. That night, after the 4 petals united in her hands, Li fell asleep by the pond right on the wooden bridge. The moon still hung in the sky, its gentle light blanketing the village. In her dream, she found herself standing in the middle of a lotus field, wider than she'd ever seen. White, pink, red, purple blooms stretched beyond the horizon. In the distance, someone approached, clad in white, gliding like mist. It was Hoa Trinh. She said nothing at first, only looked at My Lai with eyes full of love and sorrow. Then she reached out and placed a hand over My Lai's heart. "You think you're holding the lotus heart, but in truth you are the lotus heart." My Lai was stunned. Hoa Trinh smiled softly. "When I became spirit, I did not vanish. I chose to let a piece of my soul reincarnate as light through generations. You are the final thread. You're not someone who bears the mission. You actually are the mission." My Lai stepped back, heart racing. "No, I'm just a village girl. I never wanted to be anyone special." Hoa Trinh nodded. "Precisely because you didn't want it, you're worthy. When one seeks the light, they are not yet awake. But when they become the light, they are." The dream sky began to shimmer. The lotuses around her glowed and slowly dissolved into the breeze, leaving behind only a single white bloom, drifting gently into My Lai's hands. Hoa Trihn's voice faded into light. "You are the final petal. Live as though the world will need you for another 1,000 years. And when the lotus blooms again, pass on the heart to the next worthy soul." My Lai awoke just as dawn touched the earth. Her eyes were damp and her heart still echoed with Hoa Trihn's final words. In her hand, the 4 lotus petals had merged into a complete bloom, but not made of stone, ceramic, or paper. It was made of light, clear as morning mist, visible only to those who could see with the heart. She told no one about the dream, but from that day on, something in her changed. She no longer worked tirelessly to protect the lotus pond. Instead, she taught others how to protect it, not with their hands, but with their hearts. At the Lotus Heart Center, My Lai started a small program called Little Lotus, where she told ancient tales, taught children to sit in quiet and listen, not to the outside world, but to their inner voice. Each blooming season, she no longer picked lotus flowers from the pond. Instead, she let the children choose their own. Each stood by the water, whispered a wish into the bloom's ear, then released it gently back into the water. The flowers floated away, carrying the dreams of White Lotus Village children toward the rising sun. One day a child asked, "Teacher, if you're not here someday, who will tell us the stories?" My Lai knelt down smiling. "If you remember that the lotus is born from mud and still choose to live kindly in a dirty world, then you won't need me. You will be the storyteller." And so many little lotuses grew up. Some became artists, some researchers, some traveled as far as Europe. but each carried within them an invisible bloom, and Mai Li knew Hua Trin never truly left. She now lived in the wind, in light, in the eyes of every child who saw a lotus, and the lotus heart was no longer a sacred relic. It had become a living current. 10 years passed. Li now had silver strands in her hair, but her eyes still shone bright. The Lotus Heart Center had become a familiar place for generations of students. People came from cities, from abroad, from places with no lotus at all, just to hear stories of a flower that grew from mud and still smelled sweet. One scorching June day, a young woman returned to the village. Her name was Traman, once a little lotus. The same child who once asked, "Who will tell stories when you're gone?" Now Traman was a famous television host, followed by millions. She had returned to film a special segment, The Lotus Heart Legend or Belief. When she met Mai Li again, she bowed politely, but her eyes were no longer a child's. In them was confidence, skepticism, and a hint of distance. "Miss Mai," Traman said as the cameras were setting up, "can you say clearly, is the Lotus Heart real? Or is it just a story made up to preserve a vanishing village?" Mai Li looked at her for a long while, then gently replied, "If you must see it with your eyes, then it isn't real. But if you see it with your heart, then it has always been there." Traman smiled gently but with a hint of sadness. "Our generation lives fast, lives factually, lives visibly. I can't build my life on things I can't prove." Billy smiled too, without judgment. "Then stay here for 3 days. No filming, no questions, no performance. Just silence, sit among the lotuses and ask your heart again." Traman agreed. 3 days, under the summer sun. No Wi-Fi, no camera. She sat by the pond, watching each lotus bloom, and watched her own heart open and close, little by little. On the 3rd night, she approached Mai Li. No mic, no script. Just one small question. "Miss, if someone lives under stage lights but still keeps a lotus inside their heart, are they still a lotus?" Mai Li held her hand and nodded. "The lotus doesn't need to be in the pond. It only needs to keep its fragrance." The 3 days in the village left a strange silence inside Traman. When she returned to Saigon, she walked back into the studio, but no longer felt the usual rush. The lights, the scripts, the cameras, they were still there. But she was not the same. She didn't quit her job. But during her broadcasts, she began adding moments of stillness. No music, no fast talking. Just a short scene, a lotus blooming, an old man by a street stall, a child copying poems. At first, the team pushed back. Viewers don't want that kind of stuff. Strangely, letters poured in. I cried watching that. I'd forgotten the world still had space for gentleness. I stopped. Truly stopped, after seeing that silent lotus. Bit by bit, her program stopped being entertainment. It became a space to remind people of their own humanity. One day she opened a tiny place in the city, called it the Quiet Lotus. No big sign, no neon lights. Just a small bamboo-floored room, a few cushions, and a simple pond of artificial lotuses in the center. People came. No need to buy anything. "Just sit," some cried silently. Some sat for hours without a word. Some wrote in the guest book. I thought I'd gone numb. But somehow the lotus still blooms inside. Drummond didn't preach, didn't call for change. She just placed a single lotus seed in the city and let it grow. One day, she returned to the village and placed in Mai Li's hands a dried lotus leaf, pressed between 2 pages with a note. "You told me the stories. Now I'm telling them to the world." Mai Li looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "The lotus has bloomed in the city. I no longer worry." The boy's name was Nguyen, born on a rainy night when the lotus pond overflowed and thunder roared beyond the fields. His mother, once a student of Mai Li, named him with a wish. "May you live pure and whole, and wherever you go, never forget you are a lotus born from mud." Nguyen grew up beside the pond, following his grandmother in the evenings to pick lotus stems and roots. He spoke little, but his eyes sparkled. He always carried a small notebook, where he wrote village tales. Miss Mai's sayings and quiet truths felt from the earth, the water, the people. At 18, he earned a scholarship to study architecture in Japan. Before he left, he sat on the old wooden bridge, wrote a single line. "I'm not bringing the lotus, but I'm bringing the soil." In Japan, everything was different, cold, dry, orderly. Nguyen excelled in school but remained quiet. No parties, no neon, At night, he walked alone through parks, watching cherry blossoms fall, thinking of his village lotuses. One day, a professor asked, "What kind of building would you like to design for your final project?" Nguyen replied, "A space where people do nothing, a room for stillness. No purpose, only presence." The professor chuckled but approved. Nguyen designed a small structure shaped like an unfolding lotus, placed on a man-made pond. Inside, wooden floors, natural light, and the sound of trickling water. He named it Tum Tram, a station for the soul. When the building was constructed in Kyoto, people came, curious. Then more came. The elderly, the young, the anxious, the weary. They came and sat, no phones, no music, no talk. A reporter asked Nguyen, "Why do you think the Japanese love your building?" Nguyen replied, "Because whether in Japan or Vietnam, people are tired. And when they're tired, they don't need a place to prove who they are. What they do or how much they earn, they just need a place to remember they are still breathing." The reporter nodded, then asked, "Will you return to Vietnam someday?" Nguyen looked toward the pond, where the afternoon light hit a blooming lotus. "I never left." One March morning, as cherry blossoms began blooming in Japan, Nguyen received a short email. "I'm Trum An, once a student of Mai Li. I'm working on a series called Those Who Carry the Lotus Heart Across the World. I read about you in a Kyoto article. I want to meet you, not to interview, but to be silent with you. Just once." Nguyen read it and smiled. He replied with a single sentence, "The lotus does not schedule meetings, but if you come with your heart, it will always be there." Weeks later, Trum An arrived in Kyoto. No crew, no cameras, just a small bag, a notebook, and a dried lotus pressed in glass. They met at Tom Tram, the wooden lotus-shaped house on the artificial pond. No formal greetings, no handshakes. Just a glance, the kind shared by souls who've met before, perhaps in another life. They sat for hours, not speaking, just facing each other, watching ripples dance gently on the water. As dusk fell, Trum An finally said, "I've lived too long through my mouth, my eyes, my ears. Now I want to live through my heart." Nguyen nodded gently. No questions needed. 3 days later, they began planning a project. Together, Lotus Across Lands, a global network of quiet lotus spaces. No religion, no sect, no explanation needed. Just rooms of stillness where anyone could sit and remember who they are. The first bloomed in Saigon, within a corporate tower. The second in Kyoto, beside Tom Tram. The third in Paris, hidden within a noisy metro station. The fourth in Nairobi, in a humble neighborhood where people meditated for the first time. After long days of struggle, on every door a sign read, "You don't need to do anything here. Just be still. The lotus will bloom in you, the moment you stop trying to become anything." The project spread slowly, quietly, but steadily. No advertising, no campaigns, just word of mouth like how real lotuses bloom, silently yet radiantly. A year later, at an international conference, someone asked, "Who founded this movement?" Nguyen and Trum An answered together, "No one. It's an old dream that many are still retelling." One winter afternoon in a small northern European city, snow dusted the rooftops like ash. Inside the corner of an old public library, there was a strange little room called Lotus Room. There were no books there, no desks, just a few round cushions, rough wooden walls, and a small artificial pond with a single white lotus. Not real, but crafted with grace. A 10-year-old boy named Emile lived nearby. He didn't know what lotus meant. He knew nothing of Vietnam, Buddhism, or legends. All he knew was this. Whenever he felt sad, scared, or misunderstood, he came here, sat down, stayed quiet. No one told Emile what to do inside that room. But every time he left, he felt lighter. One day, after a fight at school, Emile ran into the lotus room, plopped down, and gripped the fake flower in the pond tightly. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he heard a voice inside. The lotus doesn't choose where to bloom. As long as the mud is honest and the heart is warm, it will grow. Emile didn't know whose voice that was. No one had spoken to him, but he scribbled the sentence in broken Swedish in his notebook. Beneath it, he drew an 8-petaled flower. Not perfect, not precise, but full of truth. Years later, Emile became an illustrator. On the cover of his first children's book, there was an image of a child sitting in a lotus pond, holding light in his hands. In the acknowledgments, Emil wrote, "I don't know who built that room, but I know, thanks to it, I didn't grow up hard. I never met the storyteller, but that room told me something. Very real. The Girl Who Became a White Lotus is a symbolic story about the quiet but powerful journey of nurturing the human soul in a chaotic, a modern world. At its heart, the lotus represents a person who grows out of mud, hardship, pain, imperfection, yet rises untouched, pure and fragrant. Each character, Mai Lai, the gentle guardian of the pond; Triman, the modern-day storyteller; Yuyen, the architect of silence; and even Emil, a foreign boy who never knew the original tale, embodies the universal potential to live with inner clarity and grace. No matter where or how one was born, the lotus heart they speak of isn't a magical artifact or religious icon. It's the capacity within every human being to remain kind, honest, and awake in a world that often rewards the opposite. The story quietly argues that healing doesn't come from external miracles, but from the act of stopping, breathing, and simply being present. When Trum An creates spaces of stillness in the heart of cities, when Nguyen builds rooms for people to sit and not be anything, and when Emil, without knowing any of them, still feels something bloom inside his chest, the story affirms that the deepest truths don't need translation. They are felt, passed silently like seeds. The narrative ends where it began, in the silence of a room, in the presence of a lotus, and in a child who sits down, not to achieve, prove, or escape, but just to listen. And in that listening, the lotus blooms, not for glory, not for story, but simply because the mud was honest and the heart was warm. Thank you for listening to this tale from Vietnam. If you feel a little more quiet, a little more warm inside, then the story has bloomed. Don't forget to subscribe and join us again to explore more timeless legends from the land of lotus and legends. See you in the next story.